Hello there, Mr. Sutton here, bringing you the IM3 2.2 Extra Practice number 6 solutions on factoring by grouping. And let's go ahead and check out the puzzle that goes with this one. So for this puzzle, we're trying to solve the riddle, how did Snidely Spellbinder write a 4-letter word that begins and ends with E? And to do this, we have to take a look at these expressions, write them in factored form, and then match that with an answer that's down below. There's two different problem sets, each going with two different sets of answers. Now, when we get a match, what we're supposed to do is actually cross out the letter in the box above our answer. So we're going to basically form an answer based off of what's left over after we've done all these problems. So with that said, let's go ahead and see what the answer is. So here's our first problem, and one thing that's helpful to know going into all the problems on this particular puzzle is that they're all set up to be factorable using factoring by grouping. They all have 4 terms, and the ratio of the first 2 terms and the ratio of the second 2 terms always ends up being the same. So our process is going to be the same pretty much every time. Factor out our greatest common factor from the first and the last 2 terms, and then that'll give us a duplicate parentheses that we can factor out to get the rest of the factors. So let's try it out on this first one. Looking at my first 2 terms, I've got an x that I can pull out of those. That leaves me with x plus 3. And then for my next 2 terms, xk and 3k, well, it looks like I have a common factor of k, so plus k I can pull out of there. And that leaves me again with an x and a plus 3. Now I can pull that x plus 3 out as its own common factor, and then the leftovers we've got are the x and the plus k that go next to it. Looking at my answers, I'm looking for x plus 3 and x plus k, so it looks like I'm going to see that right here, this one kind of in the middle, so that means I'm going to cross off this n and move on to the next question. Here we go with the second problem. Looking at my first 2 terms on this one, they both have an a that I can pull out of there. That means we have an a squared becoming a inside the parentheses, and this is now going to be minus 2. For the next 2 terms, they both have a d for a common factor, a positive d. That leaves me with an a and a minus 2 there. So then a minus 2 comes out as a common factor, and a plus d are our leftovers for the other one. Taking a look and matching that with something down below, here's the a plus d, and here's the a minus 2 that we're looking for, so we can cross off the a in that box. On number 3, looking at my first 2 terms, it looks like those have a u that I can pull out. That leaves me with a v and a plus 5. For the next 2 terms, they both have at least a v to the first power to pull out, so let me do that. And that means v squared is now a v, and 5v is plus 5. v plus 5 is my new common factor that I can pull out of all of that. And that leaves me with u plus v for the other leftovers. So I'm looking for some u's. I've got some u's right here, but not the ones I want. So looking further down, at the very end, we have a u plus v and a v plus 5. So let's cross off that 4. Kind of interesting that there's a number in there, but we'll just roll with it. For this next one, looking at the first 2 terms, x squared and xk, we can pull an x out of those. So that leaves me with an x and a minus k. For the next 2 terms, I can definitely pull a plus 4 out of those, leaving me with an x and a minus k again. So then x minus k is what's coming out of everything. And then x plus 4 goes next to it as another factor. Looking for my x's, let's see here. I've got an x plus k and x plus 3. That's not what I'm looking for. X plus k, 4x plus 3, still not what I'm looking for. What am I missing? Oh, wait, back here. There we go. X plus 4, x minus k. Cross off that e and move on. Okay, we've made it to the 5th problem. Looking at the first 2 terms on this one, a, d, and 3a have a common factor of a that's coming out. So that leaves me with a d plus 3. And the next one's a little trickier. We have a d squared and a 3d, so I can pull out a d. Now, I always like to pull out whatever the sign is of my 3rd term. Because my 3rd term's negative, I'm going to pull a negative out of that, so negative d is what I'm taking out. That means that negative d squared, if I divide by negative d, now becomes a positive d. And negative 3d divided by negative d, that's going to be a positive 3. So d plus 3 can come out of all of that. And then a minus d is my other factor. So a minus 3, d plus 3, that's going to be this b1 right here. Let me cross that off. Things are starting to get a little bit more interesting with this next problem. With y cubed and y squared, now I can pull out a y to the second power. That's the most I've been able to pull out exponent-wise for this whole puzzle. And then that leaves us with a y, and y squared now is a plus 1. For the 2y and the 2, let me pull a 2 out of those. That leaves me with a y and a plus 1 again. So then y plus 1 is what's coming out of everything. And that leaves leftovers of y squared and positive 2. Looking for some y's down here. Not the y's we wanted over here. Let's keep going. Here's the next one. We've got y squared plus 2, y plus 1. That's what I want. So let's cross off the r. And that's the end of this set of problems. We're going to move on to the next set with different letters to cross off. All right, here's another one with 4 terms. Still using grouping. That hasn't changed. Looking at my first 2 terms, it looks like we have an m to the second power. That's the highest that I can pull out of both of those terms. And if I pull an m squared out of m cubed, that's now an m. This next term is the m squareds are canceling, so that leaves me with a plus n. Looking at my last 2 terms, I can pull an n squared out of both of those. So that leaves me with an m and a plus n again. So then m plus n, that's the common factor I can pull out of everything. And m squared plus n squared is the other factor. So that's going to be this one right here. Let's cross off the I. On this one, we've got 2 terms to begin with a u cubed and a u squared v. So I can definitely take a u to the second power out of those. U cubed is now going to be a u. And this next term here, all that's left is the minus v. Looking at my last 2 terms, it looks like a v squared is what I can take out of both of these. So I take that out, and I'm left with a u. And this is now going to be a minus v to the first power. So u minus v, that's my common factor. And then u squared plus v squared is the one that goes next to it. So this one was actually pretty similar to the last problem, just different letters. So that ends up giving us, it looks like this L is the match, so let's cross that off. All right, let's look at the next 2 terms on this one. We have a t squared and a 2t, so definitely I can take a t out of those. Leaves me with a t plus 2. And then for the next 2 terms, 3kt and 6k, well, for the numbers, I can take out a 3. And it looks like they both have a k to give as well, so a 3 and a k. That leaves me with just a t for that first term, and then 6k divided by 3k is just 2, so plus 2. So that means my t plus 2 is a common factor that I can take out. And then we have a t and a plus 3k that goes next to it. So that looks like it's going to be this t right here. Let me cross that one off. For this problem, looking at my first 2 terms, it looks like for numbers I can pull out a 2. That goes into 2 and 14. And I can also pull out an a since they both have an a. Can't do anything about that b though. So 2ab, all that's left when I pull out 2a is just the b. And then 14a divided by 2a is a plus 7. Now these next 2 terms, this one's a little trickier. I can't pull out any numbers or letters that they both have other than a 1. So I'm going to pull out a 1 because I have to. So that leaves me with a b and a plus 7 in there. Nothing super crazy about that. So that means that b plus 7 then is my common factor. Let me take that out of everything. And then 2a plus 1 is my other factor that goes next to it. So let me find that down below. Here's the 2a plus 1 and the b plus 7 that goes with it. So cross off the p and move on to the next. All right, here's our second to last problem. These first 2 terms both have an m that I can take out. So that leaves me with an m and a plus n. The last 2 terms, it looks like I can take a negative 3 out of both of these. And I'm going to take a negative because my third term's negative, so I always like to do it that way. So minus 3 comes out, leaves me with a positive m, and this will now be a positive n. So m plus n, my common factor, that's coming out. And then we have m minus 3 for the other factor. Looking for lots of m's here. And it looks like, is this the one? M plus n, m minus 3? Yep, that's the one I want. So cross off the n that goes with that. All right, this is it. Final boss battle. Last question. We got one more letter to cross off, and I have no idea what the answer is going to be. So looking at our first two terms, I think they both have an x squared that I can take out, so let's do that. All that's left of my first term is the 5 and the y. And then x squared is now going to be a minus 1. For my next two terms, this is kind of like the last problem, where you have to pull a 1 out of both of those because there's nothing else that you can. And that leaves me again with a 5y and a minus 1. So then 5y minus 1 can come out. And x squared plus 1 is the leftovers that goes in a parentheses there. So looking for those, let me think here. X squared plus 1, there it is. And then 5y minus 1 goes with it. So that g is getting crossed off. And now we can move on to seeing what those letters actually spell out. All right, time to answer this riddle. So let's start spelling things out. We've got a W, an I, a T, an H, and based off of the other letters that are left over, I think this is all one word, with. So let me look at my next word now. It's probably each of these forms one word. So we have an E, an A, an S, and another E. How did Snidely Spellbinder write a four-letter word that begins and ends with E? With ease. Get it? Because E begins and ends with an E, and it was easy for him to do, I guess. I don't know. All right, till next time, Mr. Sutton signing off.